Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Well, it's December, which used to mean that we were in the stretch run of the NFL season. Now, not so much. Just still rounding the turn there on the back bend. I'm Dan Wiederer, joined by Rich Campbell to talk all things Bears, make our picks here for Week 13, and discuss why Rich is feeling lucky, which seems like the greatest place to start. Can you give us some insight into what's going on with that?
In Vegas, trying to get some good vibes before I get on a plane later. Head to Vegas this weekend. I'm meeting up with a couple buddies who I haven't seen in a while. We're going to go to Raiders WFT. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that game when we get to our picks and in the just for fun category, because I'm looking to have fun out there. You've already been this year and had a great time, so I'm looking to follow you.
Well, yeah, and enjoy that stadium. All of a sudden, that game is much more relevant than it looked like it was going to be, 7 or 8 weeks ago between those teams, but we will save that for another time. The Bears are getting ready to play host to the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday at Soldier Field. In a best-case scenario, it's Kyler Murray versus Justin Fields. Justin Fields still dealing with injured ribs, and so his status, whether he can play at all, whether he can play a little bit, whether he can play a medium amount is up for debate. But there's a lot to break down with the Chicago Bears team, and I want to start here because you can follow the chaos from a distance more so than you used to be able to follow the chaos. And I'd be interested to get your perspective on the last few weeks, right? And the Bears obviously were able to snap their 5-game losing streak on Thanksgiving Day against the Detroit Lions, but it wasn't a pretty victory, and it came at the tail end of a turbulent week that began with a loss to the Ravens, continued with the routine, I guess, semi-regular chaos that sort of infiltrates the building at Halas Hall. And as someone now a time zone and hundreds of miles away, I'm just curious as to what your takeaways and what your biggest questions were from the chaos that was Week 12 in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Well, go back even before that Ravens game when you, Deion Miller, and I were talking about Justin Fields' development over the final 7-8 games of the season. And I pulled out the metaphor of a collapsing building, right? The ceiling starts to crack and around you, and the ground starts to shake. And how is he going to steady his development if the whole thing starts to fall? Well, I didn't expect it to start falling 3 days after that. But I remember thinking, okay, here it comes, right? This is exactly what we talked about. And you and I have covered these types of situations in Chicago and other cities where the self-preservation instinct in the building starts to kick in. The rumors start flying. Media reports get legs. They get traction when maybe otherwise they wouldn't, because everything's fair game, because teams that don't know how to control the message, don't know how to control the situation, they lose control of it. And that is what happened with the Bears. To me, obviously a sense of deja vu. You and I went through this with Mark Trestman's tenure coming to an end in 2014, to a lesser extent with John Fox in 2017. But I understand how the sausage is made in terms of the messaging, in terms of the questions that are being asked, the answers that are being given. And so I was just sort of shaking my head. It's a sad thing. I mean, this is what I said when John Fox and Mark Trestman both exited ignominiously, is that ultimately it's just a sad deal when you see people fail, when you see things break down, you see the best of intentions break down, you see good guys, nice guys stumble, fall face first, and have embarrassing moments like the Fire Nagy chants that just sort of add that layer of sensationalism. I feel for you. I mean, having to go through this again in an unsavory way. But to me, I could go on, but I'll stop after this.
Yeah.
It underscores how irrelevant the Bears are nationally, because the only time they're worth talking about is when there's smoke coming from Halas Hall. And, what's on fire now there? They're not being talked about for good reasons, for playing meaningful football in December, for a developing quarterback that is showing promise. They're being talked about nationally, and they're catching my attention because they're dysfunctional.
So this gives us a few different paths to go down. And I'm going to start here because, as you mentioned, all of a sudden you start getting unsolicited texts and phone calls from a lot of people in a lot of different areas doing exactly what you said, what the heck is going on there, right?
I was getting them too, and I'm removed.
Right. I've had conversations with people over the last 10 days to 2 weeks that I never expected to be having conversations about in regards to, these are dudes that played for the organization. These are people that coach in the organization. These are people that are just elsewhere in the league who have a fascination with what in the world is going on there and why can't Chicago ever seem to get it right. You use the word deja vu and you say, man, there is a lot to that, right? And Cutler was on ESPN 1000 a week and a half ago with Waddle and Sylvie and was talking about George McCaskey having to address the locker room the day that they were traveling to Detroit for that Thanksgiving game after 2-3 days of absolute chaos in Lake Forest. And Jay said, never good. It's never good when George has to come down, and basically just said that he feels for the players in this situation, but there is this level of outside fascination on why this organization always seems to wind back
right
here, right? So I'll put you back in your old role for a second. I've got another launching point after this, but
before you do, let me tell you this. I got a text from a league contact that asked me if I was now working for Patch.com.
So this is exactly where I wanted to put you back in this role because, listen, when we were riding in the same car on this beat, figuratively, literally a lot of times, there would be those discussions. You'd get something, you'd get your phone and you'd see, oh, geez, Jordan Howard, deleted every picture that had Bears memorabilia on it. And the calls would happen, right? You'd call me, I'd call you. What do we do with this? How do we handle this, right? And every situation is a little bit different, right? 2021 in the NFL, rumors are going to fly all the time. Speculation is going to fly all the time. And so as a reporter, as a news outlet, as a team of Chicago Bears reporters, you have to decide what you're going to do with each specific instance. I'll put you in this chair before I provide some of my own input. But on Tuesday morning of week 12, there's a report from Patch.com from Mark Conkle, who is a former Pulitzer Prize winner at the Chicago Sun-Times for news reporting, saying that Matt Nagy had been informed of his firing. You're back in the role. What are the first steps you make and take to try to get your arms around this and figure out what to do with it? Also, by the way, understanding that on that Tuesday, because the Bears are playing on Thursday, it's a full day of availability at Halas Hall with access to people that you want to talk to about situations like this.
Yeah, well, and I was aware of the report at the time on that Tuesday morning. I mean, I'm still alive, right? Still,
right. So I mean,
getting the news.
How did you become aware of it, right? And if you're aware of it, certainly the people at the highest, pegs on the totem pole at Halas Hall should be aware of it.
Right. Well, so my first reaction was to take that report and layer it against my institutional knowledge of how George McCaskey operates, how the organization operates. Understanding, of course, the subtext to all of that is that if Matt were to have been fired after that Thursday game or any time between now and the end of the regular season, it would be a first, right? They don't normally do this. They don't do this at all. There's no precedent for them firing a coach in midseason. I think back to the end of the Mark Trestman era, when the only assistant who was fired along with Mark was Aaron Kromer, and it was because of the unsavoriness of the buyer's remorse exchange and him talking to a reporter. Right, there had to be that
refresh our audience on that because people may not remember exactly the chaos of that December.
Yeah, sure. Well, boy, yeah, that provides a lot of the context for the way I internalize what's happening now. So yeah, if you recall, I mean, just the locker room really fell apart. The personalities in that particular team, aging, in many cases loyal to Lovie Smith instead of Mark Trestman.
But not a cohesive unit. Obviously, there's that bombshell that comes out that he has said the Bears should have buyer's remorse for signing Jay Cutler to an 8-year extension, and he did it so anonymously, but then later was confronted and had to admit that it was him who did that anonymously.
Right. And so that was the level of unsavoriness. That was the extra layer. It wasn't just failing on the field or failing as a football function. That was the extra layer that got Aaron Kromer fired. Now that was at the end of the season, but again, he was singled out from the rest of the assistants there. So for me, think about Matt. That's not what's happening here. They're just failing as a football team. They're failing, to develop and show that progress. Okay. So that doesn't add up. That they would somehow feel compelled to act in a way they have not acted before. Now, maybe it's a new George McCaskey, right? Or he wants to get out in front of a coaching search or something like that. So then, okay, all right, yeah, it's not impossible, but I'm extremely skeptical, right? And so then, if I'm a reporter, you start relying on the relationships you have, and that is what's really important for fans to understand, is that it works both ways, right? Because the team has an incentive to make sure the messaging is correct. Yeah. What has the team done to cultivate relationships here? We work to cultivate relationships. The team in some cases does, but how functional are those relationships? Media to team, media to personnel, that some type of trust exists so that the narrative can be accurate. Right. So that the narrative can be made
fair and accurate, right?
And personally, I'm not going to sit here and lob grenades from over the wall, because I'm over the wall.
You can lob grenades anytime. This is YouTube.
I just say that you understand this, and you've talked about this many times in other forums, is that I think to myself when I see that story, I don't think that trust is there. I don't think those relationships are there for this to be contained and this to be squashed, and it's not even squashed. It's just for this to be properly contextualized as either inaccurate or whatever the case may be. And as I think we saw play out, those relationships don't exist. That trust between media and team and whatever, it doesn't exist. And that's how you lose control of a situation and the messaging, to where Matt Nagy has to come back the day after the Thursday Thanksgiving game and start calling out individual reports way after the fact. I thought that was a huge misstep on his part. And it just goes to show you that in these situations, you reap what you sow. You've got to lay the groundwork when things are going well, so that when they don't go well, you can stay in control, and the Bears aren't in that position right now.
You can contain it, right? And so listen, like we've talked off the air about what happened on that Tuesday in regards to the Bears sticking to their normal media schedule and their normal media policy. And so Chris Tabor, the special teams coordinator, ended up being the first person to address the rumors of Matt Nagy's imminent firing. Now, listen, I've said a number of times that Matt Nagy's job security was a topic well before a report came out on patch.com. At the Bears game 2 days earlier, there were chants of fire Nagy and Nagy sucks spreading all around Soldier Field. A night later, at the United Center during a Bulls game, the chance of fire Nagy mushroomed again. So Matt Nagy's job status was going to be a topic in Week 12, whether Mark Conkle and Patch.com jumped into the ring or not. Now listen, the Patch.com report was erroneous. As it turns out, Matt had never been told that he was going to be fired the day after Thanksgiving. Matt was not going to be fired the day after Thanksgiving, but there was still an obligation as a media corps, people who cover the team on a daily basis, to get comment from the team on what was happening with the outside outrage about their coach and obviously the reports that he might be out the door sooner than most expected. So I've said a number of times, there's a much different context to this of people who say, you can't just run with rumor and speculation. No, you can't. That's part of our job as journalists, is to make sure that you don't do that. But you can ask people in the building, in charge of these decisions, to help you get the accuracy of it, right? The morning the Patch.com report came out, I sent an email to the Tribune requesting an audience with either George McCaskey, Ted Phillips, and or Ryan Pace to discuss the state of the team and Matt Nagy's current job security. Not surprisingly, that was rejected. On top of that, as you know from previous experiences, in other situations, the Bears have a one-size-fits-all policy that says, hey, we are not going to address every nugget of speculation and every rumor, because if we address one, then we have to address them all. I recall specifically, I think in 2016, where there was a report originating on CBSSports.com that Bill Polian was going to come in and join the Bears front office in some regard. And you dug for days trying to get an answer to that. And you weren't able to get an answer from anyone within the team, and they gave you the same answer, right? We can't address every nugget of speculation and rumor, otherwise we have to address them all. I remember sitting across from Ryan Pace with you saying, Ryan, listen, like that's a good policy in a lot of instances, but you have to take them case by case. Otherwise, you're going to wind up at some point engulfed in a firestorm that you didn't need to be engulfed in if you just had sort of the savvy to differentiate between certain reports of speculation and rumor and ones that have elevated to a point where that journalist, Mark Conkle from Patch.com, is doing multiple sports talk radio interviews, right? In the hours after that report surfaces. And now it's become the entire talking point in the entire city. And as an organization, you get your arms around that. So it's a long-winded way of saying that policy you've dealt with in the past, and the things that we warned people in the organization were going to happen if they didn't have a flexibility to that policy happened, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you can see the track record over 10 years, more, maybe 15 years. I mean, what happened with Matt Nagy last week, it's not the first time. It's not the second time. It's not the third time, right? Like, at some point, the results speak for themselves. And personally, I don't understand the devotion to that one size fits all policy, because it is proven, as we're saying, to not be the best way to go here. And you can't, when these cats get out of the bag, you can't put them back in after the fact, right? I mean, you've got to build that trust and the working relationship over time. And you can't just rally when the house is on fire. And so when the Bears would come out and say, okay, well, this is not true, even if they were to have done that, would you have believed them?
Well, I mean,
I don't know. I mean, you have to have trust. You have to have trust.
Right.
And the Bears don't have that. And it's because these issues have popped up over and over again. Personally, I just don't agree with the policy. It's their prerogative to have the policy, but they also are going to sleep in the bed they've made. And they've got a public relations problem right now with their coach, with the way this regime appears to be lame duck right now. And it's not the first time.
Jay Cutler, as we mentioned earlier, he was asked whether he was surprised by this latest flare-up, and he said, not at all. Happens every 2 to 3 years. And it's what you're saying. It's a repetitive thing. And people who have been in that building, played in the organization, experienced it firsthand, know that it repeats itself. And when it repeats itself, you know, the old saying, right? There you go. So I want to bring up two other things, and then we'll get into this Sunday's game against the Cardinals. One of them is, I'm going to take you back to another place in the time machine. It's the Phoenician, the owners meeting in 2019, that opening night reception, which is always a fantastic time. I bring this up because on that night, Matt Nagy was the NFL's coach of the year, reigning coach of the year. On that weekend, Ryan Pace had been named the league's executive of the year. The Bears were coming off a 12-4 division championship season, and everyone inside Halas Hall in the city of Chicago and a lot of people outside thought that the Super Bowl window was opening. I remember having pretty energized discussions that evening with Ryan and Matt. Obviously, you know, drinks are flowing at that reception, and there's a juice to it, right? And I recall getting in the car.
Might have been a few bro hugs along the way.
I recall driving with you back to the hotel in Scottsdale and thinking to myself and saying this out loud to you, man, this is really cool. The window is open here. You're going to be in my shotgun seat as a reporter. Ryan and Matt are going to be in their posts for, 6 to 10 years at least. And this is going to be a ride where the momentum that the Bears built in 2018 is just going to become a snowball that's going to be really fun to chronicle. Well, now fast forward. I'm looking at my calendar, December 3rd, 2021. You fight to Vegas later because you're not in the business anymore. Matt's certainly not going to be the Chicago Bears head coach past January 11th of next month. Ryan's job security is in doubt. And it's just this huge reminder of life comes at you fast in this league and really fast. And you can't think that anything, anywhere, at any time is a given.
Well, the coach of the year thing, it really has stuck in my mind recently as Matt in particular has come under fire and how quickly that luster disappeared. And the coach of the year tag, that award is no guarantee. You see this all the time. The coach of the year and 4 or 5 years later, it's what have you done for me lately? That's the league, right? I mean, this happens in a number of different cases, but the NFL is like that. It's what makes it so compelling. Usually the other way around, right? That you're that bottom feeder team and you go and replace one of those other teams that have fallen off quickly enough. I mean, if you want to think about it at its core, they missed on the quarterback, right? And even at that time, even that night, there was nothing saying that they had the quarterback right. There was reasons to believe that it was ascending, but it was not. It was not, lock it down, extend the contract, all of that.
There was talk of if he had the season in 2019 that everyone internally thought he was going to have, how much do we pay him, right? Like that was the discussion at that time because the flaws had not yet been illuminated to a level where you go, oh no, but yeah, continue.
Well, right. And now at that time also, the afterglow of the Khalil Mack trade was still ever present, right? I mean, you felt that all the time and what that defense was. And in that regard, it shows you these windows are small. I don't look back on that and think, oh man, we thought a window was there that really wasn't. No, the window was there. It just closed. Because
missteps.
Defense got old, the quarterback didn't have it, and there's all kinds of questions about whether the coach can develop a quarterback. You also look at the Bears draft and develop record. It's awful. I mean, you cannot miss on top 10 picks in 2015, 2016, 2017, right? I mean, you got to, and it's not just drafting, it's draft and development.
And second round picks, right?
What's that?
Second round picks. Adam Shaheen, Anthony Miller, guys in the second round that they need to be guys that get a second contract from you.
Organizational failure. And really, if you wanted the conversation to stop there, for me, it'd be okay. You just say, look, this regime came in, said we have to build through the draft. Have they? No. Okay, done. I don't need to even say more about it. That's it. They've had enough chances. What else? I mean, there's nothing else.
Yeah, and for me, people that point at Matt's overall record, which includes 12-4 in that Coach of the Year season in 2018, and they say he's been to the playoffs two of his first three seasons. So there are still people that do that and say, listen, like that it's a decent track record, and people with worse track records have been kept around. My thing is, listen, the window was open. You talked in the summer of 2019 at that Bears 100 convention about chasing great, right? And being a Super Bowl contender. They've been anything but great for 3 consecutive seasons now. The losing has compounded. The offense hasn't gotten better. There's no arrow that points up at this point. And so if you're reading this with any sort of objective lens, you say, look, the direction is right in front of you. It's hitting you in the face. Well, and so now what do you do about it?
And of course, I mean, Matt was brought in to develop the quarterback and be that offensive coach. I mean, anyone, as you said, an objective lens, you look at that 12-4 and you understand what the defense meant to that team and their ability to take the ball away and score. Now, the offense, we had said coming out of that year, if they're just average, the offense just average, they'd be even better. And here we are years later, new quarterback, same problems, same rankings in the 20s for all these different categories offensively. It's very straightforward the way I look at it.